The best mechanic in the galaxy fixed a Catgirl's bike for free. 3 minutes later, 12 alien SUVs. Jax Marlowe's workshop was a chaotic symphony of tools, wires, and half-finished machines. The walls were lined with glowing panels, spinning gears, and devices that seemed to hum with their own life. The smell of hot metal and oil hung thick in the air. For most visitors, it looked like madness. For Jax, it was home. Every piece of machinery told a story, and he knew those stories better than anyone in the galaxy. He was working on a small, hovering engine when the clanging of the outer door echoed through the workshop. He looked up, expecting one of the usual merchants or fellow mechanics. Instead, he saw a figure that made him pause. The being was small, almost childlike, with delicate features and large, amber-colored eyes that seemed to glow softly. Her ears were tall and pointed, flicking nervously as she surveyed the cluttered workshop. A tangle of dark hair framed her face, and a long, slender tail swayed behind her as she stepped closer. She wore a jumpsuit scratched with dust and scuff marks and clutched a broken hoverbike under her arm. Jax raised an eyebrow. "That's one unusual package you've got there," he said. The girl's ears twitched. "Please," she stammered, her voice soft but urgent. "Can you fix it? It won't start. I don't have much time." Jax set down his wrench and gave her a long, appraising look. There was something about her, something that made him want to help immediately. Maybe it was the urgency in her eyes or the way her small frame carried herself with quiet determination. "Sit it down," he said, pointing to a corner of the workshop. "I'll take a look." The girl carefully set the hoverbike on a raised platform. It was a sleek little machine built for speed and agility, but its engine was clearly damaged. Sparks still flickered from a shorted circuit, and the fuel injector looked burned out. Jax crouched beside the bike and examined it. He ran his fingers over the circuits, tapped a few panels, and listened to the faint hum of residual energy. He could tell immediately what had happened. The engine had overloaded due to an improperly calibrated energy core. Most mechanics would have charged a fortune to replace the parts and recalibrate the bike. Jax didn't care about the money. 3 minutes, he said, almost to himself. "Give me 3 minutes and you'll be back on the road." The girl's ears perked up. 3 minutes, she whispered, hope flickering in her eyes. 3 minutes, Jax confirmed, already pulling out tools and small replacement parts from drawers hidden around the workshop. He worked quickly, hands moving with a speed and precision that was almost mesmerizing. Sparks flew, panels clicked, and a soft hum of energy filled the room as the bike began to respond. The girl watched, wide-eyed, as he connected a small energy regulator, adjusted the hover stabilizers, and replaced a tiny circuit. Each movement was deliberate, almost like a dance. There was no hesitation, no wasted motion, just pure skill. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly, curiosity mixed with disbelief. No one else would just help for free." Jax smiled faintly, not looking up. "Because sometimes it's not about money, sometimes it's about doing the right thing." The bike's engine purred to life. The soft vibration traveled through the platform, and the lights on the control panel blinked back to life. The girl gasped, almost stepping back in shock. It's working," she exclaimed. She reached out and pressed the control pad, testing the hover function. The bike lifted slightly, steady and smooth, exactly as it should. Jax leaned back on his heels and wiped his hands on a rag. "Told you, 3 minutes." The girl's face lit up with gratitude. She almost couldn't believe what had just happened. She had expected hours of repairs, maybe even having to beg or barter for someone to help. But here was this human, a stranger, fixing her bike in minutes. I don't have anything to give you," she said, shaking her head. "I don't have credits, I don't have tools, nothing." Jax waved a hand dismissively. "It's fine, just promise me you'll be careful out there. And to remember this, even when things look impossible, someone can always help." The girl hesitated, her tail flicking nervously. Then, with a soft smile, she climbed onto the bike. "Thank you," she said simply. And with a hum of energy, the hoverbike lifted off the platform and glided toward the exit of the workshop. Jax watched her go, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He returned to his bench, already thinking about the next project, the next problem to solve. Life on Nebula Station 7 was rarely quiet, and there was always a machine that needed fixing. But just as the hum of the workshop settled back into its usual rhythm, Jax noticed something in the distance outside the window. A flicker of movement caught his eye, far beyond the busy corridors of the station. At first, he thought it was a group of cargo haulers or patrol drones, but as he focused, his stomach dropped. 12 SUVs, sleek and heavily armored, were moving through the streets of the station. Their engines glowed a deep red, and the markings on the sides indicated they belonged to the Varrock Syndicate, one of the most feared organizations in this sector of the galaxy. Jax's brow furrowed. The girl, Myra, she hadn't even left the station before trouble found her. He grabbed his communicator. "Myra, this is Jax," he called out, hoping the small transmitter she had on her bike would still work. 12 SUVs, they're heading your way. You need to take cover now?" For a moment there was only static, then a soft, shaky voice replied. I see them. What do I do?" "Listen to me carefully," Jax said, standing and grabbing a small toolkit. "Take the side corridors, the ones with the least traffic. Don't let them see you. I'll follow. Stay calm and keep moving." The corridors of Nebula Station 7 were a maze of twisting alleys, transport tubes, and cargo bays. Most travelers would have been hopelessly lost, but Jax knew every shortcut, every hidden passage. He climbed into his custom hoverjet, a small but powerful craft he had built himself. Its thrusters hummed as he took off, following the trajectory of Myra's bike from above. The chase began. The SUVs moved with terrifying precision, their drivers skilled and ruthless. Myra navigated as best as she could, but the weight of panic slowed her. Jax swooped in, signaling her with quick hand gestures, guiding her through hidden tunnels under cargo lifts and around automated transport drones. At one point, a heavy SUV tried to cut her off at a corner. Jax reacted instantly, sending a magnetic pulse that disrupted the SUV's hover engines just long enough for Myra to slip through. The SUV groaned, sparks flying from its chassis, before the driver regained control. Myra's eyes widened. How are you doing all this?" she shouted, barely keeping her bike stable as Jax darted ahead to block the next obstacle. Jax didn't answer. Words weren't needed. His actions spoke louder than anything. Every turn he suggested, every sudden stop or jump was calculated to keep her safe. His mind worked like a supercomputer, analyzing movement, speed, and danger points faster than any alien could anticipate. The Syndicate SUVs weren't just fast, they were relentless. One of them deployed a small drone, which zipped toward Myra, scanning and preparing to immobilize the bike with energy nets. Jax acted instantly, firing a flare that interfered with the drone's sensors, causing it to spin out of control and crash harmlessly into a wall. Myra gasped and looked back at him. "You're incredible," Jax grinned, though his focus never wavered. "Humans are stubborn," he said simply. "We don't give up, not when someone needs help." The chase continued, weaving through the station like a deadly dance. Every alley and passage became a battlefield, every turn a test of skill and courage. The Syndicate drivers grew more frustrated, their attacks more aggressive, but Jax's knowledge of the terrain and quick thinking kept Myra one step ahead. For the first time in her life, Myra felt that she wasn't alone, that even in a galaxy so big and dangerous, there was someone watching over her, guiding her, protecting her. And that thought, strange as it was, gave her hope, a feeling she hadn't known in a long time. Finally, Jax spotted a place where they could pause, a small abandoned scrapyard filled with old, broken ships and spare parts. It wasn't much, but it offered cover and time to think. "Hold here," Jax instructed. "We need to plan our next move." "They're not going to give up easily." Myra nodded, her tail curling nervously around the bike's frame. She had survived the first wave thanks to him, and somehow she knew that as long as Jax was around, there was a chance she could survive the next. Jax landed his hoverjet with a soft thud and joined her at the bike. He examined the rear sensors of the SUVs through a small scanner he pulled from his vest. "They're fast, well-armed, and they think they can intimidate anyone. But speed and firepower don't beat brains and preparation. That's our advantage." Myra watched him, awe in her eyes. "You're not just a mechanic, you're amazing." Jax smiled faintly. "Just a human who likes to fix things," he said. But inside, he knew the real fight was only just beginning. The galaxy was big, dangerous, and unpredictable. But right now, in this little scrapyard with a small Catgirl and a broken bike, he felt alive. And he would do whatever it took to make sure she got home safely. The scrapyard was silent except for the hum of distant engines and the soft crackle of loose wires in the old starships scattered around. Jax crouched behind a pile of twisted metal, his scanner still active in his hands. Myra stayed close, her tail curled tightly around her legs, her amber eyes scanning the horizon nervously. "They're coming," Jack said quietly. 12 SUVs, all heavily armed. "They'll expect me to chase them, that's their mistake." Myra swallowed hard. 12, that's impossible to fight against." Jack shook his head. "It's not about fighting, it's about thinking. You follow my lead, do exactly what I say, and we can make them think twice about following us." Myra nodded, trusting him even though she didn't fully understand. She had seen what he could do, and that was enough for now. The sound of heavy engines echoed through the scrapyard. Red lights glinted off the metal wreckage as the first SUV came into view, moving slowly, scanning the area with sensors. Jax motioned for Myra to stay low. He pulled out a small device from his vest, a magnetic disruptor. With a quick adjustment, he set it to short pulses and aimed it at a nearby pile of old hover engines. When the SUV entered the zone, he activated the device. A sudden magnetic pulse surged through the metal, causing the pile of engines to shift and topple. The SUV skidded sharply, sparks flying from its hull as it avoided the falling debris. The remaining SUVs hesitated, recalculating their approach. Myra gasped. "How did you do that?" "Sometimes the best weapons aren't guns," Jax replied with a small grin. "Sometimes it's a little creativity." He moved swiftly from cover to cover, leading Myra deeper into the scrapyard. "We need to set traps and slow them down. The more obstacles we have, the longer they'll take and the more mistakes they'll make." Using old shipping crates, broken ship parts, and loose cables, Jax built simple but effective traps. He rigged energy nets that would deploy if a vehicle triggered a pressure sensor. He set up false pathways with mirrors and reflective panels to confuse their sensors. In less than 15 minutes, the scrapyard had transformed into a maze of hazards. Myra watched in awe. "You're turning all this junk into a battlefield?" "Not a battlefield," Jax corrected. "A way for us to survive. Don't think of it as fighting them. Think of it as making them think twice." The first SUV reappeared at the entrance, followed closely by the rest. They moved cautiously now, sensors scanning the scrapyard but struggling to make sense of the obstacles. Jack signaled Myra forward, guiding her toward a narrow passage between two derelict ships. The passage was just wide enough for her hoverbike. "Go now," he whispered. Myra pushed the throttle and shot through the corridor. One SUV tried to follow but got caught in a magnetic trap. Its hover engines sputtered, sparks flying, and it came to a grinding halt, leaving the others behind. "Nice work," Myra whispered, impressed despite the danger. "You're incredible." Jax didn't answer. He was already moving, checking the next set of traps. Another SUV tried to circle around, but Jax had anticipated it. With a quick flick of a switch, he activated a set of energy barriers hidden among the scrap. The SUV's sensors went haywire, forcing it to back up and find a new route. Myra's confidence grew as she followed his guidance. She had never thought she would feel so safe with anyone outside her family, yet here was this human, leading her through a deadly maze without a single mistake. "They'll keep coming," Jack said, scanning the approaching SUVs. "They're not giving up that easily. But the more we delay them, the more frustrated they get, and frustrated drivers make mistakes." Just then, a drone shot out from the lead SUV. It zipped through the scrapyard, scanning for movement and preparing to immobilize Myra's bike with an energy net. Jax reacted instantly. He grabbed a small flare gun from his belt and fired a shot toward the drone. The flare burst in a bright electric flash, interfering with the drone's sensors. It spun out of control and crashed into a pile of old engines. Myra let out a relieved breath. "You saved me again," Jax nodded. "Keep moving, don't stop, don't hesitate, just follow my lead." The SUVs were growing reckless now. They had lost one vehicle to the traps and another to the drone interference. Jax used this to his advantage. He led Myra into a section of the scrapyard filled with large, derelict starship hulls. Here, he could create narrow paths that the SUVs could not follow. He quickly attached small thrusters to broken crates, rigging them to roll and block certain paths. When the SUVs tried to follow, they were forced to stop, slow down, or risk crashing. Each delay gave Myra more time to move ahead. "You're amazing," Myra said again, her voice filled with awe. "How do you know what to do so fast?" Jack shrugged. "Experience and paying attention. Most people just react. Humans, we plan even when things look impossible." The SUVs were now split, some following the wrong paths, some stuck behind traps. The lead vehicle tried to use its sensors to detect Myra, but Jax had already covered the area with reflective panels and false signals. The SUV misread her location several times, crashing into piles of scrap or getting tangled in energy nets. Myra began to feel a strange mixture of fear and excitement. She had never imagined being part of something like this, racing through a scrapyard, dodging heavily armed vehicles. And yet, with Jax guiding her, she felt unstoppable. At one point, a SUV fired a short-range disruptor aimed at her hoverbike. Jax noticed it and yelled, "Left! Left now!" Myra swerved just in time. The disruptor hit a pile of scrap metal instead, exploding in a harmless shower of sparks. "Thanks," Myra said, her heart racing. I don't know what I would have done without you." Jax didn't answer immediately. His eyes scanned the horizon, calculating the next moves. "We're not done yet," he said finally. "They'll regroup, but we're going to make them think twice about ever chasing us again." He led her to a higher platform, a section of the scrapyard with old observation towers. From here, he could see all the approaching vehicles. He studied their movements carefully, noting their speed, their formation, and their likely strategy. "Here's the plan," he said quietly. "We're going to split them up. The SUVs are big and heavy, they can't move quickly in tight spaces. We'll use the scrapyard to slow them down and force them into mistakes. You follow my path exactly, and we'll get out of here safely." Myra nodded, determination replacing her fear. She trusted him completely. Jax activated a series of automated barriers and traps he had prepared in advance. As the first SUV moved into the trap zone, it triggered a series of magnetic pulses that immobilized its hover engines temporarily. The vehicle skidded and crashed into a pile of scrap, sending debris flying. The remaining SUVs hesitated, unsure of the path forward. "Go!" Jax shouted. Myra accelerated, weaving between debris and following the narrow paths Jax had marked. The SUVs tried to follow, but the trap slowed them down. One by one, they got stuck, crashed, or took wrong turns. Jax guided Myra with quick hand signals and short commands, staying always one step ahead of the pursuers. Finally, after what felt like hours but was only minutes, Myra reached the edge of the scrapyard. Beyond it lay an open corridor leading back to the station's main thoroughfare. Jax followed closely, activating one last series of flares and magnetic pulses to block any SUVs trying to follow. Myra slowed down, her tail flicking nervously. She looked at Jax, amazement and gratitude shining in her eyes. We did it," she said softly. Jax nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "For now, but remember the galaxy is big, trouble doesn't end here, you need to keep moving and you need to stay smart." She climbed off the bike, brushing dust from her jumpsuit. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You already did," Jax replied. "You trusted me and you survived, that's thanks enough." Myra looked back at the scrapyard one last time. The SUVs were regrouping, but the damage and confusion had slowed them down enough for her to escape. She knew she owed her life to this human, this mechanic who had appeared out of nowhere and saved her with nothing but skill, intelligence, and courage. As she sped away towards safety, Jax watched from the platform, his eyes scanning the horizon. The chase wasn't over. There would be more danger ahead, more challenges, but for now, Myra was safe, and that was enough. For Jax, this was just another day in the life of the best mechanic in the galaxy, fixing what others could not, protecting those who could not protect themselves, and showing that sometimes human ingenuity was more powerful than any weapon or machine. The galaxy was dangerous, chaotic, and unpredictable. But in moments like this, one human could make all the difference. Myra's hoverbike hummed steadily as she followed Jax through the narrow corridors of the old orbital scrapyard. The place was a maze of derelict ships, piles of scrap metal, and forgotten machinery. Every turn presented a new obstacle, but Jax moved confidently, his eyes constantly scanning the area for threats. Myra had learned to trust his instincts completely. "They'll keep coming," Jax said quietly, glancing at the scanners he had mounted on the hoverjet hovering beside him. "They're not going to give up easily. The Varrock Syndicate doesn't retreat just because one of their SUVs got caught in a trap." Myra's ears twitched nervously. "What do we do? I don't have weapons, nothing to fight back with." Jax shook his head. "We're not fighting them head-on, that's the mistake most people make. Brute force isn't the answer, we're going to outsmart them." They reached a section of the scrapyard that had once been a storage hub for large starship engines. Rusted walls rose high above them, and enormous containers were stacked in precarious towers. It was the perfect place for an ambush, and Jax wasted no time planning it. "Listen," he said, crouching beside a pile of old fuel canisters. "We're going to make them think this area is empty. They'll come in confident, expecting to find us easy prey. That's when the traps go off." Myra nodded, though fear lingered in her amber eyes. "Traps?" she asked, glancing at the twisted metal around them. "Not dangerous ones," Jax reassured her. "Just clever. A few magnetic nets, some decoy hoverbikes, and energy barriers. Nothing to hurt anyone, just enough to confuse and slow them down." Jax's hands moved quickly, assembling the devices with practiced ease. He attached thrusters to scrap crates so they could roll into the path of the SUVs at the right moment. He connected energy sensors to metal plates that would rise from the ground like walls if a vehicle triggered them. Each piece of scrap, each wire, each panel was part of a carefully calculated plan. Myra watched in awe. How can one person do all this so fast? "Humans have a way of thinking outside the box," Jax replied with a small grin. "We don't just react. We plan, we improvise, we adapt. That's our edge." After a few minutes, the ambush was ready. Jax led Myra to a narrow passage between two derelict ships. From this vantage point, they could see the entrance to the scrapyard, and more importantly, they could see the SUVs approaching. The red lights glinted ominously, and the engines hummed like predators closing in on prey. "They're coming," Jax said softly. "Stay close, follow my instructions exactly, and don't panic." The lead SUV entered the scrapyard first. It moved cautiously, scanning for threats. Jax waited until it was directly above one of the magnetic traps, then triggered it. The metal plates shifted with a loud clang, and the SUV's hover engines sputtered, sparks flying as it skidded to a stop. The remaining SUVs hesitated, unsure of the safest path. Jax took this moment to signal Myra forward. She nudged her hoverbike and slipped through the narrow passage, moving past the decoy hoverbikes he had placed. The SUVs tried to follow, but the traps caused confusion, forcing some to back up or take wrong turns. "This way," Jax shouted, pointing to a small tunnel barely wide enough for Myra's bike. She followed without hesitation, trusting his judgment. One SUV attempted to follow but got tangled in an energy net, its hover engines failing and causing it to crash into a pile of scrap. Sparks flew everywhere and the driver cursed loudly. Myra's confidence grew with every successful maneuver. "This is amazing," she whispered, her tail flicking in excitement. "You're incredible," Jax smiled faintly. "Just a human doing what humans do best." The SUVs regrouped, but their formation was broken. Frustration was clear in their movements. They had underestimated the intelligence and creativity of one human and a small alien girl. Jax knew the next stage was crucial. He needed to split them up further, forcing them to chase decoys while keeping Myra safe. He activated a series of reflective panels and mirrors, creating false sensor readings. The lead SUV slowed, scanning the area repeatedly, unsure of where Myra actually was. The remaining vehicles followed what they thought was her path, only to run into more traps. Jax directed Myra to a higher platform, a section of the scrapyard that had once been an observation tower. From here, she could see all the approaching SUVs, but Jax had rigged a series of automated barriers that would activate when they got close. "Here, that's what we do next," he said, crouching behind a pile of scrap. "I'll lure the lead SUV into a tight corner. You stay hidden and ready to move forward. When I give the signal, all the barriers go up, blocking their path. They won't know which way to go, and that will give us the advantage." Myra nodded, her ears twitching nervously. She had never been part of a plan like this before, but she trusted Jax completely. The lead SUV moved into the corner, unaware of the small devices hidden in the scrap. Jax pressed a button on his wrist panel, triggering a sequence of magnetic pulses and energy barriers. The SUV's hover engine sputtered as it collided with a crate, unable to maneuver properly. Sparks flew, and the driver struggled to regain control. "Now!" Jax shouted. Myra shot forward through the narrow path he had prepared. She dodged the rolling crates and energy barriers with Jax's guidance, weaving through the maze with confidence. The SUVs behind her struggled to follow, some getting stuck in traps, others crashing into decoys. The remaining drivers cursed and shouted orders, but confusion and fear had taken hold. They had no idea where Myra was, and each obstacle seemed to appear out of nowhere. Jax's plan was working perfectly. Myra's heart raced as she followed the path Jax had mapped out. She felt exhilaration, fear, and hope all at once. She had never imagined that escaping 12 heavily armed SUVs could feel like this, like a game of wits and skill, where cleverness mattered more than strength. Jax stayed close behind, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. He watched the SUVs carefully, anticipating their moves. One of the vehicles tried to circle around to cut Myra off, but Jax had already set up a magnetic trap that immobilized it. Sparks flew, and the vehicle groaned as it came to a stop. "Keep moving," Jax shouted. Almost there. Myra pushed her hoverbike to its limits, weaving through the scrapyard's corridors, guided by Jax's signals. The last few SUVs tried to regroup, but the combination of traps, decoys, and false signals had split them up completely. One driver attempted to follow a decoy path and ended up crashing into a pile of old engines, while another hesitated too long and allowed Myra to gain distance. Finally, they reached the edge of the scrapyard, where an open corridor led back to the main thoroughfare of Nebula Station 7. Beyond it, the path was clear, and Myra could see the bright lights of the station ahead. "Go!" Jax shouted. Myra accelerated, weaving past the last of the obstacles. The SUVs tried to follow, but the last magnetic pulses and barriers delayed them just enough. She shot out of the scrapyard and onto the main corridor, the hum of her hoverbike steady and strong. Myra slowed down slightly, catching her breath. She looked at Jax, awe shining in her eyes. We did it," she whispered. "We really did it." Jax landed his hoverjet beside her and climbed down. "For now," he said quietly, "they'll regroup. But you've learned something important. Brains and preparation can outmatch brute force every time." Myra nodded. She had learned more in these few minutes than she had in her entire life about courage, intelligence, and trust. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. "You already did," Jax replied with a faint smile. "You trusted me and you survived. That's thanks enough." Myra glanced back at the scrapyard one last time. The SUVs were regrouping, but the confusion and damage had slowed them down. They wouldn't catch her easily, not after what Jax had done. She realized that her life had been saved by more than just speed or luck. It had been saved by human ingenuity and courage. Jax watched her disappear into the distance, knowing the chase wasn't entirely over. There would be more dangers ahead, more challenges to face, but for now, Myra was safe. And in the galaxy, safety was a rare gift. He returned to his hoverjet, tools in hand, already thinking about the next challenge. The galaxy was vast and full of problems only a human like him could solve. And Jax was ready for all of them. For Myra, this experience had changed her forever. She had seen firsthand what one clever human could do against impossible odds. And she knew, deep in her heart, that she would never forget the human who had saved her life, not with weapons or force, but with quick thinking, skill, and an unshakable mind. And as the station lights reflected off the scrapyard metal, Jax prepared for whatever would come next, confident in the knowledge that humans, when faced with challenges, could achieve the impossible. Myra's hoverbike glided smoothly along the main corridor of Nebula Station 7. The hum of its engine steady and reassuring. Behind her, the scrapyard was a chaotic mess of twisted metal, sparks, and immobilized vehicles. She cast a glance back, and though the red lights of the Varrock SUVs flickered in the distance, they were far behind now. For the first time since this ordeal began, she allowed herself a deep breath. Jax hovered above her in his custom jet, scanning the area for any remaining threats. "We're not completely safe yet," he said. "They're regrouping. The Syndicate doesn't give up easily, and we need to be ready for any surprises." Myra nodded, her tail flicking anxiously. "I trust you," she said quietly. "I've learned that much today." Jax offered a small smile. "Good. That trust will keep you alive more than any weapons could." They moved quickly through the corridors, following paths Jax had scouted from before. He knew the station better than most of its residents, every shortcut, every hidden passage, every maintenance shaft. This knowledge allowed them to stay several steps ahead of the Syndicate's SUVs, whose drivers were now angry and confused from the earlier ambushes. After several minutes, they reached a large open docking bay. The area was filled with cargo ships, transport drones, and scattered crates. It offered both cover and options for escape, but it was also a dangerous place if the Syndicate had found them. "Listen carefully," Jax said as they descended. We're going to use this area to our advantage. The SUVs can't maneuver easily here because of the tight spaces and scattered obstacles. We'll make them think they can trap you, but instead we'll guide them into mistakes. Myra's ears twitched. I'm ready, she said. Her voice sounded steadier than before. She was beginning to feel capable, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Jax set to work immediately, using scraps of old cargo containers and loose machinery to create decoys. Small devices were hidden among the piles, ready to trigger magnetic pulses or deploy temporary barriers. He also used reflective panels to create false sensor readings, making it seem as if Myra's bike had gone one way when it had gone another. Remember, he said, handing her a small wrist device. This will help you track my signals. Follow the green light. I'll guide you through the safest paths. Myra nodded, strapping the device to her wrist. I won't let you down, she promised. Jax watched as the SUVs entered the docking bay, their engines humming and lights scanning for movement. He triggered the first set of traps. A magnetic pulse surged from a pile of scrap metal, causing the lead SUV to skid and collide with a crate. Sparks flew, and the vehicle groaned as the driver struggled to regain control. Myra followed Jax's signals, moving through narrow corridors between containers, dodging rolling crates, and staying just out of sight. One SUV tried to follow, but the narrow space and obstacles forced it to stop abruptly. Its driver cursed, realizing that they had underestimated the intelligence and preparation of their opponent. Jax activated another set of devices, sending rolling scrap crates to block paths and create diversions. The SUVs became disoriented, their sensors sending false readings, and the drivers made mistakes one after another. Some collided with walls, while others got stuck in magnetic traps. Myra's confidence grew with every successful maneuver. She began to anticipate Jax's signals, moving instinctively through the maze he had created. For the first time in her life, she felt a sense of control, a sense of hope. Almost there, Jax said over the communicator. Keep moving. The exit is just ahead through the cargo lift on your left. Trust me, you'll make it. Myra adjusted her hoverbike, moving carefully toward the lift. As she entered, the SUVs attempted to follow, but the space was too tight. The barriers and decoys slowed them down, and one driver even attempted to use a disruptor to immobilize her bike. Jax reacted immediately, activating a short-range pulse that temporarily disabled the disruptor, saving Myra from danger once again. As she emerged from the cargo lift, Myra saw the open corridor ahead of her. Freedom was in sight, but Jax was still cautious. Don't slow down now, he warned. They might try one last attempt to trap you. Keep moving until you're completely safe. Myra pushed the throttle to its maximum, her bike humming with power. The red lights of the SUVs were now far behind, their engines sputtering from the previous collisions and traps. For the first time, she allowed herself a small smile. Jax hovered above her, scanning for any remaining threats. They're done for now, he said finally. They won't chase you this far after the damage we've done. You're safe. Myra exhaled deeply, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. I can't believe we made it, she whispered. All thanks to you, Jax smiled faintly. It wasn't just me, he said. You followed my lead, stayed calm, and trusted your instincts. That's what kept you alive. They moved together toward a safer part of the station, away from the chaos of the chase. Myra's mind raced as she thought about what had just happened. She had never imagined being chased by 12 SUVs, using traps and clever tricks to survive. And yet here she was, alive and unharmed because of a human mechanic she had only just met. Why did you help me? She asked suddenly, curiosity and gratitude mixing in her voice. Jax shrugged. Sometimes it's not about money or reward, he said. Sometimes it's about doing the right thing, and today the right thing was helping you. Myra's ears twitched thoughtfully. In my world, people don't usually help for free. They always want something in return. Humans are different, Jax replied simply. We see a problem and we try to solve it. That's what we do best. They reached a quiet section of the station where the lights were softer and the hum of machinery quieter. Myra dismounted her hoverbike, her legs shaking slightly from the adrenaline and fear. You were amazing, she said again, her eyes shining. I don't know how I could ever repay you. You don't have to, Jax replied. Just promise me you'll stay safe and that you'll remember what you've learned today. The galaxy is full of danger, but it's also full of opportunity. Sometimes the right choices make all the difference. Myra nodded, her tail swaying gently. She felt a sense of gratitude and respect for this human who had risked so much to protect her. "I promise," she said softly. As she mounted her bike and prepared to continue her journey, Jax watched her go. He knew the Varrock Syndicate would eventually regroup and continue their search, but Myra was now prepared, and she had learned that human ingenuity could overcome even the most overwhelming odds. "Good luck, Myra," Jax called out as she sped away. "Remember what you've learned today. One clever mind can change the outcome of any situation." Myra waved, a small smile on her face. She felt stronger, smarter, and braver than she had ever felt before. For the first time, she believed that she could survive in a galaxy filled with danger, and maybe even make a difference herself. As she disappeared into the distance, Jax returned to his workshop. The day had been exhausting, but it had also been rewarding. He had helped someone in need, outsmarted a dangerous group, and proven once again that humans, with their creativity, skill, and courage, could achieve the impossible. The galaxy was vast, full of challenges, and often unforgiving. But in moments like these, Jax knew that one person, armed with determination and ingenuity, could make all the difference. He returned to his bench, tools in hand, already thinking about the next machine that needed fixing, the next problem that needed solving. The galaxy would never run out of challenges, and neither would he. Somewhere out there, Myra would carry the lessons she had learned, the courage she had gained, and the memory of the human who had saved her. And in a galaxy full of danger and uncertainty, that memory would remind her that even in the darkest moments, hope and ingenuity could light the way. Jax worked late into the night, the workshop filled with the soft hum of machinery and the occasional spark from his tools. The stars outside Nebula Station 7 twinkled like distant promises of adventure, and he felt a quiet satisfaction. Another problem solved, another life saved, another example of human skill making a difference in a galaxy that often underestimated them. The galaxy was big, unpredictable, and dangerous. But humans, Jax thought, had a way of surviving and thriving where others failed. One mind, one set of hands, and one fearless determination could outmatch technology, numbers, and even fear. And as the lights of the station dimmed for the night, Jax prepared for the next challenge, knowing that no matter what came his way, he would meet it with the same cleverness, skill, and courage that had saved Myra. Because that was what humans did best. They solved problems, faced danger, and proved that ingenuity, not strength alone, was the ultimate power. And somewhere in the galaxy, a young Catgirl would always remember the human mechanic who had changed her life in 3 minutes, showing her that cleverness, bravery, and heart could overcome even the most impossible odds.